Hey guys, welcome back to Choco Yo. There's a patch of woods along Highway 210 in Johnston County that most people have driven past without knowing what's in it. If you've taken that road, and a lot of people have, you've probably passed a parking lot for the Johnston County Agricultural Center. Unremarkable, paved, it's a parking lot. Right next to it, in the tree line, there's a cemetery. The cemetery probably dates to like 1820 or earlier. Some of the graves have headstones, fallen, broken, damaged by a century and a half of weather. Some have stones that appear to have been carved by hand. One polished rock has what looks like the name Jack cut deep into it. Some graves have no markers at all, just dips in the ground where the earth sank over what's underneath. Many of the people buried there were enslaved. This is their story. And it's a story of a man who made sure they were not forgotten. The Sanders family were among the largest landowners in Johnston County. Ashley Sanders owned roughly 1,500 acres in this part of the county. His father owned perhaps 10,000 acres total across the region, one of the largest holdings in Johnston County history, and left plots of land to his children when he died. The people the Sanders family enslaved lived and worked on that land, and when they died, they were buried in a small section of it, a cemetery that the plantation designated for the people that it owned. They marked their loved ones' graves with field stones, simple and impermanent, because they didn't have the means for engraved headstones. Some of the markers have survived and most haven't. The Baldy Sanders papers at the Johnston County Heritage Center document Sanders family plantation operations from 1830 to 1868, with slave birth records dating all the way back to 1774. Nearly a century of births recorded because enslaved people were property, and property had to be tracked. The names were there in the plantation ledgers and the 1863 tax list. That was the first time North Carolina required enslaved people to be listed by name. They were counted, they were recorded, and they were buried in a field, and the field grew over them. That's what erasure looks like. Not dramatic, not sudden, just time and overgrowth and a parking lot going in next door, and generations of people driving past without knowing. After emancipation, the families who had been enslaved on the Sanders plantation were free. They were free to leave, free to stay, free to try to build something in a county that had just spent 4 years at war, partly over whether they should be free at all. Some of them stayed, some of them farmed, some of them took the Sanders name, as many formerly enslaved people took the names of the people who had owned them because it was the only name they had, or because it connected them to the community they knew, or for reasons we can't fully reconstruct from the records that survive. One of those people, those men, was named Adam Sanders. We don't know exactly when Adam Sanders was born. We don't know his mother's name, although we do know she was almost certainly buried in that cemetery. What we do know is what he did. See, after emancipation, Adam Sanders bought 25 acres of the plantation where he had been enslaved, including the cemetery. Listen again. After emancipation, Adam Sanders bought 25 acres of the plantation where he had been enslaved, including the cemetery. A man who had been legally defined as property, who had been owned, like the land itself was owned, saved enough money after emancipation to buy 25 acres of the plantation where he had been held. He could have bought any 25 acres. He bought the ones with his cemetery on them. His parents are likely buried there, said Todd Johnson, executive director of the Johnston County Heritage Center. Adam Sanders bought the ground where his parents were buried so that no one else could do it. So no one else could pave it over or plant crops through it or sell it to someone who didn't know what it held. He drew a legal circle around the graves of the people who had raised in bondage, and he said, "This is mine now. This holds." The Carter family recorded "Will the Circle Be Unbroken" in 1935, although the hymn goes back way further than that. The narrator follows a loved one's body to the grave and asks the question that grief always asks: is this the end? Does death break what love made? Will the circle hold? It's a song about a kind of fear Not the fear of death itself, but the fear of severance, of the bonds that hold a family together being cut by something you can't stop. Adam Sanders had lived inside that fear his entire life. Enslavement was, among its countless brutalities, a system of severance. Families were separated by sale. Children were taken from parents. Husbands from wives. The people you loved could be removed from your life by a transaction, a document, a decision made by someone who owned you and you had nothing to say about it. The circle was broken over and over and over and over by design. What Adam Sanders did after emancipation was the exact opposite of that. He didn't just walk away from the plantation and try to forget it. He walked back. He found a deed office. He put his name on 25 acres of the land where his family had been held, where his parents were buried, where the graves were marked with field stones and carved rocks and dips in the earth. He made that circle legal. He made it unbreakable, or as close to unbreakable as a deed can make anything. Dang. More than a century after Adam Sanders bought the cemetery, his descendants are still continuing his work. Sylvia and Jeanette Wall has walked through the most overgrown parts of that cemetery searching for lost and unmarked graves. She carries a folder of family photographs. Her maternal grandmother, Louisa Sanders Smith, was born in 1878 and died in 1928. She went to Hampton Normal School, which is now Hampton University, a great-grandmother who was a teacher who educated generations of children in Johnston County. Another family member, Effie Mabel, who died of Spanish flu. Roger Creech Jr. has visited the cemetery for years, telling the stories around his family's dinner table. His grandfather was buried there in 1960. He can trace his family back to Bristol Creech, a prominent businessman with a 100-acre farm, and further back than that to the people living in the unmarked graves. He said, "I'm living proof of the love and the strength of our ancestors, and here we are just 3 generations from slavery, and I'm finding out that we're part of history. 3 generations from slavery, standing on the land that Adam Sanders bought, still tending the graves, still drawing the circle." The question the song asks, will the circle be unbroken, is a question about whether love survives death, whether the family holds together on the other side of loss. And Adam Sanders answered that question with a land deed. He couldn't bring his parents back. No, he couldn't undo what slavery had done to his family, to the families around him, to the people buried under field stones with no names on them. He couldn't carve every name into rock. He couldn't restore what had been taken, but he could buy the ground. He could put his name on it. He could make it so that the graves of the people who raised him, the people the plantation had tried to reduce the property and ledger entries and head counts, that would stay in the family, would stay in his hands, would not be paved over, would not be built on, would not be forgotten. That cemetery is still there along Highway 210 and the tree line next to a parking lot most people use without knowing what's beside it. The headstones are still falling, some of them, some graves are still unmarked. There's still work to be done, but the land is still in that family. That circle was not broken. It's been over 150 years. Adam Sanders drew that circle, and his people are still holding it. The Sanders Smith Cemetery is located on Highway 210 in Johnston County. The Johnston County Heritage Center has documented its history, and the Reclaiming the Black Past initiative has worked to preserve it. You want to know more? You think you might have some family connections to the Sanders plantation? Call the Heritage Center. They'd love to hear from you. The Baldy Sanders papers, including documenting Sanders plantation operations from 1830 to 1868, are also held there. The graves deserve to be known, so do the people in them. And that's Shoko Yo. Till next time, be good.